Hey guys, welcome back to Fur Friday tutorial number 6. Today we're going to be looking at this gorgeous French Bulldog you're going to see pop up. And thank you to Kelly Thomas, as it's one of her photos. And it's a really stunning brindle colour French Bulldog. There's a difference between a tricolour and a brindle. And a tricolour is where you have clear patches of brown, generally brown, black and white fur, where brindle is much more merged in together. So within the one patch of fur you have all the three colours essentially. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be covering the colours that we're using as well as the short fur, because most French Bulldogs are pretty short furred, so that's what we're going to be concentrating on today. And although we did do the Degu fur in number 2, I think it was, number 2, this is much shorter actually than the Degu fur. So again, when I've said it before, we're going to be going through a lot of various animals and a lot of various fur, so we may end up covering the same type as in long or short, but the colours will be different, or the areas or the animal that it's on. So yeah, today is going to be the French Bulldog. I use the Payne's Grey, the Dark Sepia, Burnt Umber, Warm Grey 2 and Warm Grey 5. Remember to get the number right today. And I'm blocking in all of the colours in the patching of the areas, patches of the areas it needs to go. So all the light areas, I'm using my Warm Grey 2. On the darker areas, I'm going in with my Dark Sepia and the Warm Grey 5. And I'm just doing it lightly, but I am doing it in the direction of the fur. So it's important, especially on short fur actually, that you try and get it in the direction. How I explain it to my patrons, I'm going to let you into a little secret here, and I did it about my motion in, I can't remember if it was previous video or up and coming video. So if you think about a clock and you put your clock face on top of the animal that you're drawing, if you look at the way the direction of the fur is going, you know in which time on the clock to head for. So if the top is facing in our case at 10 o'clock and the bottom is facing at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, then you know that that is the direction that you've got to go into, and then you just, depending on where you are, you can just move around your clock. So bear that in mind when you're doing short fur. I'm blocking all the colours in at the minute. I'm not worrying about getting everything absolutely precise and getting fur detail in yet, because there's no need to. I have indented the small patch of white that is in the forehead, which you would have seen at the beginning. There are tutorials on my channel with regards to this. Just have a look in the how to use colour pencil list, I think it is. But if you can't find it, let me know below, and if I remember, I'll pop a card up to show you where that is. But it shows you how to do the indenting method. It's something I do quite a lot with short fur when there are white areas to deal with, and it just makes life easier really. So I'm now going in with the Payne's Grey and I'm darkening the really dark areas, and I knew that I could get away with going fairly dark on here without worrying too much about spoiling the portrait. So yeah, the Payne's Grey is what we're using at the moment, and that is giving us, you can see now I'm starting to put a little bit of fur detail in there. He has the corner that we've chosen sort of peaks up to his ears. So we've got a little bit of dark, then we've got light, then we go into dark, then we go into light, and then we patch down into the mixture of the light and the dark. The white in the middle is pretty much white, but we do use a bit of grey in there later on. So you can see that my pencils firstly are nice and sharp, which is always beneficial, especially when it comes to short fur. So the more pointier your pencil you can get, the more beneficial it is for you, because you can get a lot more of the finer details within the fur. So make sure your pencils are nice and pointy. So we're deepening the shadow area with the Payne's Grey. Again, we're going in and we're starting to add the fur detail now. We're not doing it in our straight lines as we've said in previous tutorials. We're doing a slight bit of a crisscross movement. It probably looks quite precise down the camera, but there's actually little changes in the fur that make it a lot more realistic looking. I've just swapped over now to the dark sepia, and that's because I just want to add some warmth into the fur in the areas that's needed. And yeah, it's just again placing the colours where they need to be on your portrait. So if you do all this work now, it saves you having to do it all later on, which is always beneficial because we like a bit of time saving every now and then. So on each section we're just going to work up the layers, as I've said previously. That's my favourite phrase of my entire videos apparently, is as I've said. So apologies for the amount of times you're going to hear that if you watch all my fur series. Rather than you work on one section solidly at a time, what ideally you want to do is work on your areas but then work on the lights as well as the dark. So don't just do all your dark areas first and then your light, or vice versa. You need to work on them together, and that will help you get the merging between your light sections of your fur and your dark sections of your fur, because you never have a straight solid line. You always have a bit of variation. A little bit of the light comes into the dark, a little bit of the dark goes into the light. So to get that sort of merged effect, the softer effect, you need to be working on your layers as one. So you sweep across your section that you're doing and you work on your light, your dark, your light, your dark, and then you go on to your next layer and do the same, and then your next layer. So don't work on 5 layers of dark and then try and work in your light right next to it. It just makes life harder. So yeah, another top tip, just work on them both together so you can really merge in and get that real soft, natural transitional look that you need when you're doing fur. I've just blocked in there, you can see some of the deeper shadows. It can be a bit trickier because, as I say, we're doing it in small sections and it can look very odd when it's not in context. And I try, and depending on her reference photo is actually pretty good, but depending on the reference photo, I will determine myself whether or not I feel maybe I want to make it a bit darker or maybe a bit lighter. Now, although the camera is very good at picking up most details, if your light is hitting wrong, or you even, it's not light enough, then there's certain details that it will miss. And when you get used to doing portraits as often as I have done, you get used to having a bit of a gut feeling about whether or not you want to add details in or take them out. So that will come with experience. Just try and work on the basis that, and you're going to hear this a lot, draw what you see, not what you think should be there. Once you've got into the habit of doing that and you're pretty au fait on your experience, and I don't know, you trust your instinct a bit more, then you can really start looking at playing about with maybe adding a bit more depth somewhere, adding some more fur strokes and things. All that will come the more you do these, so the more confident you get in your drawing. So you can see what I mean here about working into your light areas. I'm not just simply working on the dark, I'm bringing those up into the light areas as well. What you don't want is what I class as a stop start, and that is what makes your drawings look very cartoony and very flat. I quite often get asked, how do you get past that cartoony look? And that is exactly it. You need to really look at softening your transitions. There are some strong shadows in nature, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to things like fur, unless you have a direct shadow, which casts a very strong shadow, like one on my face, you have this very direct line across my face, but even then it still has a soft blend from my dark to my light. So you need to make sure that you're including that to get it as naturally looking as possible. I decided to bring the dark indigo in because there's certain patches, certainly on the middle of his head and across the top of his eye here, that was nearing into the black, and I didn't really want to use black straight away. And we know that the dark sepia and the dark indigo is a good way of making black without using black. But the dark indigo adds a bit of cold to the area, which it did need. Although the rest of his head is quite warm, those two particular areas did have a bit of a colder feeling, so I decided to bring the dark indigo in. As much as the Payne's Grey is the colder of the two, when you're mixing the Payne's Grey with your dark sepias and your burnt umbers, then you'll find that it warms the whole portrait up. So if you just want a little bit of extra cold in there, then bringing in something like your dark indigo is actually a really good way of doing it. Okay, there isn't a huge amount left on this particular portrait to do, so I'm going to leave you to watch the rest. Again, if you've got any questions, comment below and I will answer those. If you have any requests for fur, skin, scales, anything like that, I do have nearly 100 videos coming up, so I may already cover it in a future video. But let me know and I'll see if I can cover it for you. And yeah, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe. And I put a video up every week for the fur tutorial. I go live every Wednesday. So if you click on the notification all, it will notify you when the next video goes up and when I'm live. And I shall see you guys in the next one. Bye.